This video is part of a series covering all of the document preferences within Vectorworks. This particular video covers the Dimension tab. Associate dimensions. This option will cause dimension objects snap to compatible geometry to associate with that geometry. This means that if I dimension an object, such as a wall, and later move or alter that wall's length, the dimension object will update to attempt to accommodate to the changes as much as possible. These green squares around the points where the dimension objects touch other geometry indicate that the dimension is associated to this geometry. If you do not see these indicators, the dimension will most likely not adapt to changes in the geometry itself. Auto-associate. Auto-associate will change the way that Vectorworks tries to associate dimensions snapped to multiple objects. If it's enabled, Vectorworks will simply associate the dimension with the topmost stacked object you're drawing on. If it's disabled, then when you snap to a dimension to a point shared by multiple objects, you'll be prompted to choose which of these objects the dimension is to associate with. Create dimensions in Dimension class. This option is fairly straightforward. When enabled, all dimension objects will be placed in the default Dimension class. If it's unchecked, then whatever class is currently active when you place the dimension is the class the dimension will be added to. Dimension Standard. Here, you can select the dimension standard you wish to use. A number of common standards are included by default, but you can easily create your own. To create a custom standard, click Custom, then New. Name the custom standard, then click Edit. This is where you configure almost every aspect of your dimension objects. The Note Distances Are In field will display the drawing units currently in use for this file. Witness lines. Applies witness lines to dimensions. When deselected, the witness lines will be hidden. Fixed witness line length. Select to use a fixed length for the witness lines, rather than a fixed offset from the dimensioned object, which is the default. When selected, the field for setting the witness line length is enabled on the top part of the dialog box. Dimension Always Inside. Sets the dimension values to always display between the witness lines. Linear markers. We'll select the marker attributes for use with linear dimension markers. Other markers will allow you to select the marker attributes for use with other dimension markers than linear dimension markers. Leader line markers will select the marker attributes for use with dimensioned leader lines. The marker is only visible if you first use the Object Info palette to add a leader line to the dimension, and then use the Attributes palette to add an end marker to the leader line. SIA format numbers will set all the numbers to use the SIA format. This is not available when dual layout is selected. Tolerance size sets the size of the tolerance in relation to the dimension text. Text rotation will set how text is handled when a dimension is rotated. Text can be set to horizontal, aligned, or horizontal/vertical. Align vertical text left. When a dimension is placed vertically, this will keep the text to the left of the dimension line. Layout sets whether the dimensions display as single values, dual side by side, or dual stacked. This is the option you would use to get two different dimension values on a single dimension object, as is commonly the case when attempting to show imperial and metric units at the same time. Text style assigns a text style to the dimension object. After customizing your dimension standard, you can set that standard for the document's default, as well as select already created dimension objects and change their dimension standards in the Object Info palette. Dimension slash. Finally, this area allows you to control the thickness of dimension slashes, or any linear geometry at the end of dimension lines. You can set this thickness in points, mils, or millimeters, just as you can in other locations that control line thicknesses. Make sure to watch the other videos in this series to complete your understanding of document preferences.